My guest today is a singer-songwriter, one of the best voices in rock, and former frontman for Genesis. He has a new album out called Song for a Friend, one of two albums coming out this year. I'd like to welcome back to the show, Ray Wilson.
How are you doing?
Good, man. We spoke maybe a year or two ago, I think. You had put out
I remember,
the 20-year collection thing. And so happy to speak to you again, man. Thanks for taking some time. Appreciate it.
No problem.
So I saw online you just did a few shows. You're on a little break before the tour picks up again.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of touring all the time, so I don't do touring in the traditional sense. You know, like 2 or 3 months on and then a few months off. I tour pretty much every weekend. So in the summertime, I have a lot of events around Poland and Germany. In the towns, open air, most of them.
Oh, very
Quite
cool.
a few of them in the summer, yeah.
Recently you were doing some stripped-down acoustic shows. Is that where you do a lot more? Is that where you're going to be doing on the next few shows?
No, to be honest, it's quite the opposite. I don't do very many acoustic shows anymore. I used to do quite a lot, but in the last 6 or 7 years, most of the shows I've been doing have been with at least a 5 or 6 piece band, and most of them have been like eight musicians or so. So it's actually quite unusual for me to do acoustic shows at the moment, although obviously with this new album being more acoustic, I'm going to try and go back to do a few acoustic shows again, because I know there's a certain element of my audience who really love that type of thing. You know, they like the acoustic shows, so I try to do a few more of them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking with the new album, which just came out, Song for a Friend, and I've had a chance to sit and listen to it, quite a few times now, and it's a great album. I mean, I'm a big fan of your work and your voice, obviously, and your songwriting, but this one has sort of a really more intimate approach, and you really get to hear just the melodies in your voice, and it's done really, really well. And live, I think, would probably work great in that format.
Yeah, it's been quite popular with just the few shows that I've done in an acoustic way. It works really well. A lot of the time, it's also determined by the venue that you play in. You know, right. There are some venues that are very good for acoustic music, and there are other venues that are not. You know, you need one that's kind of personal and intimate, and I also have quite a good sound system that I take with me to all of my shows, so I can use a kind of surround sound effect on a lot of these gigs, as long as I have the correct kind of room to do it in.
Oh, cool.
So if you get the room right, it's a magical experience, that's for sure. And it certainly lets the voice work. You know, I think the voice has got a lot of space in the mix, so
yeah, absolutely.
Many people enjoy that.
So, you've pretty much been consistent. You've put out albums about every 2 years or so. And were you getting to that time where you felt you needed to put out a new album, and you were looking for what to write about, and it ended up being this sort of acoustic thing about your friend and all of that? Or how did it come together?
Well, I've actually got 2 albums. There's one in the autumn, which is an electric album as well with the full band. And
right.
I'd actually written. The original idea was to release a double album, one acoustic and one electric, but it kind of changed and ended up being 2 individual releases, so the acoustic one coming first. I've written a lot of songs over the last couple of years, and I think that there's even songs I've written that don't appear on either album. They just kind of I wrote them with my friend Uwe Metzler. And they were more rock songs, really, but I just wasn't feeling it at this particular time. So I'd asked Uwe to create some more acoustic ideas, and when he did, I really felt that I had so much to say within that style, you know, because I wanted to tell stories, you know, and of course if you've got a big production, it's not always easy to get the lyric through, especially if people are listening to it and then their first language isn't English, you know, right. Which is the case for a lot of my audience, because I have fans in many different countries. So I was very happy when Uwe started to create some really nice acoustic ideas for me to write to. And I found the process of writing, especially this acoustic album, was just, it was like spreading butter, you know. It was so easy and so enjoyable, more than I think I've ever enjoyed writing an album. It really felt right to me, and I almost wanted this album to be like a short story, you know, like a little book with a few stories in it, and I've, you know, the artwork that I created, the way I had the CD printed, it's a very old-fashioned printing style, so it's like an old Ladybird book, which is children's books I used to read when I was a little boy. So I really took it quite seriously, this whole concept of short stories and this little book. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it, and I hope to do it again in the same way in the future.
The upcoming album, is that sort of going to be similar style songs, but more in a rock vein, or kind of maybe like a more previous album? Or?
No, it's not. It's very different, actually. It's not written in the same way at all, and it's a full band. I've got the full team playing on it. Neil Lee, the Genesis drummer that worked with me, is drumming on it as well. Right. It's a kind of combination of a little bit of progressive, a little bit rock, and a little bit pop. So there's a little bit of everything on there, actually. Perhaps kind of like Genesis would have done in their later stages. So there's three different elements, I think, in the music, and they're not really stories. They're just more songs in a more traditional sense, if you like. They're not storytelling at all. But there's some nice moments. There's a song called "Makes Me Think of Home," which is quite a long track. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's got some really nice guitar and saxophone stuff in it, saxophone solo, and it's just magnificent. And it's awesome. A lot of instrumental, a lot of space, very slow-moving song, a little bit like a Pink Floyd track, perhaps, something along those lines. So there's a song like that on it, and there's also a song called "They Never Should Have Sent You Roses," which I wrote about the Scottish English referendum that we had recently about separating the two countries. And I wrote about that and the parallel of me. My wife was English, for example, you know, and I'm Scottish. And there was a lot of animosity between families and in households when this referendum was taking place. And I found it quite an interesting topic to write about. But you know, that's a bit of a rock song. So there's different mood to the second album. Very, very different to the first, which is why I separated them. The original idea was to have one disc acoustic and one disc electric, but I was a bit concerned that if I did that the acoustic one wouldn't maybe get the focus that it deserved, because I think it meant a lot to me, this acoustic album. So I didn't want it to be overshadowed by, you know, a bunch of songs recorded with the full band.
No, I think that ended up being a great idea, because this is definitely a great album in its own right and worth the attention. Plus, getting a second album in a few months is nothing a fan would complain about. No,
it's hopefully they'll be happy. Yes, I've put a lot of effort into it, that's for sure.
So, talk about writing this album and the subject matter, and how was it really difficult to get in there and express those emotions and write about your friend and everything, and how hard was it to record this?
Well, I certainly felt it. You know, there's a couple of songs I wrote about my friend James Lewis, who died recently, and I certainly felt I had a very, very strong emotion when I was singing it. You know, there was tears running down my face when I was singing "Song for a Friend." I can't deny that. And I actually, when I recorded it, I only sang it once. I didn't sing it 3 or 4 times or whatever. You know, I sang it once, and I kept the recording with all of the emotion that's in the voice and how I felt is what's on the recording. So. You know, he went through had a horrific accident which left him completely disabled. He was a friend of mine for many years, and he lived with this disability for 3 or 4 years. And in the end, he couldn't live with it. Couldn't find any peace, and he took his own life in a very dramatic way, where he took his electric wheelchair that he was given, and he went to the small fishing village where he was born with a girl that was helping him, and he'd asked her to go to the car and get him a jumper because he was feeling a bit cold. And when she did, he drove himself into the harbour and went off the edge and subsequently died. So he really did it in a very rock and roll way.
Oh my goodness, that is awful. Wow.
Yeah, and he did this, and I remember at the time I couldn't go to his funeral because I was working, and I'm living in Poland. He's in Scotland, or he was in Scotland. So I thought a nice thing to do was write a song for him. So I wrote a song on, and but you know, it's, as much as that's quite a sad story, there is I think with every one of these songs there is a positive message at the end of it. There is hope at the end of it, and in this particular song, you know, I say that he's at peace now. So he's happy, he's at peace, and that's how I like to look at it.
Right.
So, you know, that's probably the saddest song on the album.
Yeah.
Other tracks I write about. When I was 30, I read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, the Brazilian author, and I read that book at a time when my if you like commercial period with Stiltskin and with Genesis had kind of come to an end, and I was going through this decision-making process, I guess, as to whether to carry on as a musician, whether to do something completely different or whatever. And I decided at that time to take a couple of years out and see what life was like without music. And I only performed one show in those 2 years with the Scorpions and the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. I just did one show in all of that time, and did a bit of reading, and I read this book, The Alchemist, and it made me think about life differently, and subsequently put me on a different kind of spiritual path, I guess. And I wrote a song, the Old Book on the Shelf, which is the first song on the new album, is a kind of parallel story to that. And in many ways, as much as the Old Book on the Shelf is kind of fictional in the way I tell it, there is an element of fact in there, in that it relates to that time in my life when I was 30 years old, read The Alchemist, and then embarked upon a solo career from that point on. So there's things like that. I talk about some rivalries within the band and issues between band members, a little bit of a Fleetwood Mac moment that I had going on about a year or so ago with a couple of girls in the band getting into relationships with the other members of the band, causing a shitload of chaos. And, you know, I wrote about that situation in a song called Light of Day that's on the album. And, you know, so I basically take subjects like that relate to my life, what I see and what I do.
Yeah, I think it comes across, and it's done really well. You also add on there Pink Floyd's High Hopes, and it fits great with the tone and the subject matter. But why that song?
It was just Uwe sent me a recording of it. He said, I've done a recording of this. What do you think about singing it? And I said, well, I would never have chosen the song that David Gilmour sang, because I don't hear my voice as being anything like his. So it wouldn't have been an obvious choice for me to do that. But when he sent it, I mean, it's a great song, and I love Pink Floyd, like everybody does. But when I started, I thought, well, I'll sing it. Let's see how it sounds, and if it sounds strong enough, then we can keep it, and if it doesn't, we'll lose it. And I sang it, and it sounds good. And I wanted to try and keep it as acoustic as I could, not to bring in drums and produce it up, because of course it's very difficult to sound in any way original with a song like that. Everybody knows it. It's such a great song. It's brilliantly played by Pink Floyd in the original form. So I thought the only thing I can do is just keep it kind of as stripped back as possible, almost like an unplugged version of the song. Yeah. And it's been very popular. People have really, really loved that song. And a lot of younger fans I have who didn't actually know the song in the first place, that really enjoy it, So it's quite nice when you introduce a song to younger people who didn't actually know it existed before, and it's quite nice when that happens,
Very cool, man. Well, like I said, I'm a big fan of yours, and I always get excited when you have a new album coming out. One of my favorite voices in rock. So, it's a great album, man. I can't wait to hear the next one.
Won't be long.
All right, awesome. Great to speak to you again, and good luck on the upcoming shows, the next album, and everything you're doing, man. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.
All right, man. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Ray for the interview. We're going to close with the title track off his album, Song for a Friend. For upcoming news and interviews, please check theprogreport.com, follow us on Facebook, at The Prog Report on Twitter, or download the podcast on iTunes. Thanks.
If you look over there, that's where I was born. And if you close your eyes and visualize, you'll see me kick a football down the road. I had a happy childhood, I always loved to dance. And all the boys would make a fool out of me, but the girls would take a chance. And it all feels like yesterday. It's amazing how the time just drifts away. I love sea air. Over there, that's where my old ma worked. Every day at 5 a.m. she'd get up so that she could take care of us. There was never a day going by where we could not rely on our old mom. I can't imagine life without her. I can't imagine now. She made everything perfect. She was just the best mom in the world. Don't you love sea air? That's where I will die. I'll take this old chair of mine and drive into the sea. And all the fishes, they will laugh at me, and seagulls, they will snap at me, but I